Hi, I'm Anjali, creative force behind Quintessence Studio and creator of Sultry Akashic Healing. Welcome to the first in a series of 3 episodes that feature special guests, all ordinary folks who share their personal pathways to higher being. Whether it's by happenstance or synchronicity, you've had a quintessential experience. Sometimes these unexplained phenomena of personal transformation come by way of our intent, almost as if we've been guided on our path once we've set our intention for change. We know we have the capacity to heal ourselves, but how does that happen? In Sultry Akashic Healing, it happens at spiritual level first. And when you synchronize healing at energetic and physical levels too, it's harmonized healing. And that's what makes the impact for lasting change that we want and we need. Our first in this series is about someone who cherishes the heritage of his birth family as the truest blessing of his life, who knew from age 3 there was something different about him. Growing up amidst a traditional church family and throughout 13 years of graduate physics studies, he's a trained, true, hard scientist. Suspecting he was always on spectrum with Asperger's, things that are obvious to others seemed to elude him. So you can be sure anything metaphorical escaped him, including the soul's preferred nonverbal stuff of art and imagery. Our spiritual uniqueness in whatever earthly environment we find ourselves in is not the easiest thing in the world to pinpoint, let alone understand. So how does someone super science-y embrace the spiritual? Does it happen all of a sudden from one experiment that proved to be a quintessential experience? He embarks on the sacred path of yoga in 2010, having set the intention for growth, healing, and wisdom. More than a decade later, he tells us what clarified itself. Clues that came via unusual ways, through lucid dreams, all the stuff that would elude him. Looking back, all the signs were there that he recognized his spiritual state from the very beginning. Get ready for some heartwarming and humorous tales, how someone heck-bent on science measurements and irrefutable evidence felt tested by and called to investigate all mysteries unexplained. He reflects on how it's our family members, spiritual or earthly, here or on the other side, who really guide us as we go. Meet Stephen. Welcome to Quintessential Experiences. Today we have our special guest, Steve from Colorado. Stephen is my husband. So we figure he's the perfect person to have on Quintessential Experiences because he considers himself kind of the most ordinary guy there ever was, who never really was into so many things that were quintessential earlier in his life, at least not to his conscious mind. And here he has come to it and is ready to start talking about what he's noticed about his life and his spiritual development since before we were married and all those years since. So welcome, Stevie. Glad to have you.
Thank you, sweetheart.
As you know, family and friends and all of our viewers, we're all getting to know each other as these episodes are being revealed. And we're hoping that each time it allows folks to come to that place inside themselves where they feel that they also want to share something that they've either held very close inside or something that feels really meaningful or important to them, but haven't really had that chance or opportunity or known exactly who would they like to really talk about this with. Marion, I'm going to turn this completely over to you and to you, Mark, so that you can allow Stephen to answer your questions about his quintessential experiences, especially since he's taken up yoga. Okay.
Well, I think it's lovely to meet you, Stephen. I really
Lovely
do.
to meet you both.
And, you know, I would just like to know what's brought you to this moment in time, really. What is it that's driving you? You're obviously married to Angelina and you have a wonderful, wonderful wife who's very, very spiritual in all sorts of ways. How does that impact you on your life?
Well, there's no getting away from it, is there? Right? You know, I love my wife, and at relatively early time in our marriage almost right away. I realized that she could do these things that I just didn't believe in. And, what do you do at that point? I chose to expand my concept of what can be and what is. And as the years have gone by, I've just seen her do so many other things that I just needed to integrate into my scientific worldview. As a small child, I would often lay in bed at night pondering, how is it that any of this can be? How is it that I can perceive? How is it that I can do things? What is this? I didn't have the term consciousness. In fact, at the age of 3, I could barely speak. I had a delayed onset of probably some Asperger's. We know by now there was some in the family. I didn't speak until I was 2.5 or something. Very fascinated by the universe, consciousness in particular, along spiritual lines, is that I was born into a church family. My father was an Anglican priest from a long line of Anglican priests. We lived in rectories. We went to church, and there was a lot of, at least in the church and in Sunday school, which of course I always attended, there was a lot of talk of God, and God created the universe. And so from very early on, although I was scientifically leaning, I was confronted with the interest in spirit initially. And then by the time I met my wife, what a powerful spirit can actually do. My interest in consciousness intensified as I studied physics in university. You may know about Sir Roger Penrose from Oxford. He got a lot of interest among mainstream scientists into the field of consciousness. And so I was following that with great interest. And from early on in our marriage, I could see that Angela could do all of these things, that it really expanded what a theory of consciousness would need to explain in my view. And so my worldview, my universe view, had to try to keep up with it. Just ask questions like, how can she do this? How can this possibly be? I could see that she was doing it, and that there was, and my attempts to disprove it were futile.
I think one of your final answers.
Do you remember the socks? Socks.
The results were inconclusive.
Okay, so this is my story about my young wife. We were married for only a few months by this point. And we were in this new town, Hamilton, Ontario. I was starting a PhD in physics. So she was off doing things, pursuing her interests. She had come back from this meditation group telling me about this meditation she had done on her quiet meow. It was a toy that she had when she was very small. And two of her older cousins, 2 boys, were playing with quiet meow, which is a cat toy, throwing it across the room,
back and forth across the room.
And at some point, the tail got torn off. Angela was very upset.
Oh, yes.
Very upset about what they did to quiet meow. So anyway, she had told me that she had done this meditation, and it was a healing inner child. In those days, Exactly. They were doing the inner child meditations. They guided her through this process of finding her inner child, and the child has something to show you. And it was this thing, and she had to draw it. And she drew the quiet meow. And when she drew it back, it had the tail on it. And then the teacher told her, okay, now scan your hand across this, and you should be able to feel something from what you've drawn. And she had just done this drawing a crayon. So eyes closed, scan the hand across it. And she said, I could feel it. And, obnoxious PhD student, what was I, 26 years old? I'm thinking to myself, oh, no, you can't. This hypothesis is testable. So,
and by George, I'm going to test it.
So 10 minutes later, she's sitting at the dining room table, and it's dark. I've turned out all the lights in the house, and there's just a little bit of street lights coming in from outside. We're in downtown Hamilton. I had a stack of papers there, plus her quiet meow. And she was sitting at the table with this big winter hat on, and I'd taken socks, and I stuffed these socks up over her eyes. So she couldn't see anything. She
Wrapped-
probably
and
couldn't
wrapped-
smell anything.
And you wrapped the scarf.
Oh yeah,
around my head.
I wrapped a scarf around her head. She was just lucky that she could breathe. And so I had a little piece of paper, and I would do these trials, and I just indicate what I'd done in the trials. So the first 10 trials, quiet meow was not even in there. Then maybe somewhere between 10 and 15, put it on the top. And in the first 10, she just went, no, 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 no. And eventually, when I put it in there, she just said, oh, there it is. I'm thinking, God damn.
God damn.
So then I do a whole bunch of negative trials again. So it's not there. And every time she says, no, no, no. And the next thing I tried, rather than just putting it on top again, I'm thinking maybe she smells it or something. I
Put a scarf over my head.
Left it in a stack of papers, but part way down, it was not on the top. It was down under several pages. And she put her hand over it and she said, well, maybe, but it's not the same. And I'm thinking to myself, God damn. and so I do this. We go through a whole bunch of mostly negative trials, and she got, every time that it wasn't there, she got it right away. And of course, I put it in also upside down. And maybe there were 5 trials where it was actually there, probably a total of somewhere between 30 and 50 trials. This is almost 30 years ago now.
I was getting tired. It was getting 10 o'clock.
And she's getting tired. And she says, Stevie, can we just go to bed? I'm getting tired. And I said, well, okay. Okay. She says, well, how did I do? I said, it was inconclusive. And what I meant by that was that it was not a double-blind study, because here I am, I know what the answer is, and I'm the one who's doing the trials. And I fessed up pretty quickly that that's what had happened. But that was the first experience where she had done something that was overtly psychic, in my view, and it's certainly impossible in my mind until I saw her do it. And since that time, there have been, it must be in the hundreds, and many different kinds of things, from remote viewing to seeing things that could happen in the future. The most profound experiences for me personally that I witnessed were the things related to my dear relatives when they were dying. It was very reassuring to know that she could tell me when they were going to die and what the circumstances would be and what it would be like afterwards, what would happen. Things about the family dynamic surrounding it that I didn't know. A lot of detailed information. But yet the most profound experiences with Angeli were surrounding death of a loved one. And I was left very comforted by the whole experience.
So how did that change you, Steve? How did that change your concept of what Angeli does and other people that are associated with her and us weird people? How did that, what did that do?
Me and all my friends.
I transformed from someone who saw things and somewhere between black and white and shades of gray. And it really seemed that way. That's what my teenage experiences were like. It wasn't like that when I was a small child. As a small child, everything was magical and beautiful. Somewhere in my teenage years, things became somewhere between black and white and shades of gray. Mm-hmm. And I would say that the color is back and brighter than ever.
Oh.
Everything is more beautiful.
That's remarkable.
I think that's amazing.
And I think when you're faced with this experience of the dying of a loved one, and you receive this kind of comfort, there is a feeling of gratitude, and that in my experience, is the most beautiful feeling you can have.
This your grandmother you're talking about?
For one, but so in fact for two, both grandmothers. But I would say that when my
dad's mom.
Yeah, it's your dad's mom. That
I certainly had an experience with my dad's mother.
Okay.
So you want me to tell you the experience?
Yes.
After her passing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because she's actually here with you now. That's
wonderful.
That's what we want you to know. So I think you must tell the story.
Okay, so I just had this dream that I was asleep and I opened my eyes and there was my grandmother who passed away maybe a few years before, a year or two before, my grandmother Arnold. She was standing next to the bed and just smiling. There was no words exchanged. She was just kind of holding her hands like this, standing by the bed, smiling, and a beautiful feeling. And then my childhood bedroom transformed into the actual bedroom that I was in. And my eyes were still open and she was still there. And then she just disappeared. It was beautiful.
That was a visitation.
And I was grateful.
I had the same similar experience when my grandmother died. You know, she didn't actually pass at that time, but she'd gone into unconsciousness and came to see all the children in the house. And all I can remember her doing was shh. So as she went round the bedroom. So I understand totally where you're coming from with that.
There was nothing that needed to be said. There was nothing that needed to be said.
There's no talking. There's no talking in these visitations.
Yeah. It's a feeling though that it does something inside, doesn't it, Stephen?
It does.
Yeah, it does.
It's that gratitude. It's that feeling of love and gratitude.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah.
It's the best thing I know.
Yeah, it was very much like you were the chosen one. You know, I've chosen you. You're awake. You can see me. It's like your grandmother. You know, she interrupted your sleep to come to say, be there for you
and smile. Yeah.
And more generally, it's a beautiful thing when you, like most of us, you go through long periods where you feel that you're isolated and life is hard and there are these dark forces, whatever. And then sometimes that illusion is lifted for a moment and you see that, no, you're not alone. And there are these beautiful angelic beings that are present. And just a few times in my life that it's been obvious that they're there. But there have been like half a dozen. That was one of them.
You've had visitations from all of your grandparents now, haven't you?
Well, with my grandmother Wagner, who died just shortly before, a few years before my grandmother, I just had a sense that she was around. She was suffering, but she really pulled together a lot of strength to visit with me and be positive. And after she passed, I just had this regular feeling that she was around for a while. Now, I also had a few dreams with my grandfather Arnold after he passed. One of them was just kind of witnessing him almost like a boy. And I was peering back through a foggy lens into the past. I don't know if that was a visitation or not, but I did much later, so this is just a few years ago, have a dream that was much more compelling from the sense of visitation. He came into the room, into the space where I was, and he was out of breath and he was tired. It had taken him some effort to get there. I offered him a chair to sit down in, and as he was sitting down, he took my hand. He was saying, "It's so good to see you." And he took my hand and he squeezed my hand hard. He has big, strong hands. He was a military man. He's a brigadier general. While he was squeezing my hand and still leaning back into the chair, he pulled me right close into his face and he said, "Look out for the girl." And I thought, oh, that's something. I better call home in the morning. My parents are are 3 hours ahead. They're in Nova Scotia. We're in Denver. So I called home and I told this to my mother. I found out that my Aunt Lori, who was his youngest daughter, had a cardiac episode that night. To me, it didn't sound like a coincidence to me. She's only had one.
No, that's right.
Heart disease is very rare in my family. So that was an experience with my grandfather. He was quite a formative figure in my life.
You also had an experience with a spiritual being who actually gave you his name. Tell us the story.
So that experience was very intense. So by this point, I was doing yoga for a few years, and I had started doing meditations. There was another series of dreams that I'd had in the past after just doing my first few Gayatri mantras one evening. And I had this series of half a dozen dreams about yoga where I seemed to be channeling different yogic lessons, most of them pretty simple concepts, but it was pretty wild. I was having a series of lucid dreams. I was with Angeli's uncle, by the way, who had also passed away. Mm-hmm. We were in the downstairs of their house, which was quite familiar to us. And I was dressed in my wedding clothes. And he was also dressed in the kurta. I don't know what you know about Hindu ceremonies, and there's a tradition of putting on the bindi or the tika. So I was sitting down and uncle was putting on my tika.
Which he did many years at the Vali celebration.
At this point, it was just him and I downstairs in the basement. Now I'm thinking to myself, what's going on? Because we're already married and uncle's dead. I had some sense that I was dreaming. And so then uncle steps away and he examines the tika, and I guess it's looking okay. He's smoking. Uncle smoked.
He smoked.
So he's taking a puff of his cigarette. And he's sitting back and now in his chair. He's not standing anymore. And he's blowing these perfect smoke rings, which turns out to be significant, but I didn't know it at the time of the dream. He's blowing these perfect smoke rings. And he's saying, oh, he killed himself. And I'm thinking, what is he talking about? Who is he? And there was this very loud, resonant voice. Never had experienced quite, certainly not before, not quite like it since. The voice said, I am Nuri Dantanam. And of course I said, well, how do you spell that? So they take me into what kind of looks like a war room. And there are these glass boxes with maps underneath. And there are these geometric diagrams of what appear to be installations superimposed on the map. They were trying to explain to me that you're right in your theories of consciousness that there needs to be a geometric matching condition of source to signal in order for a communication to take place. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then gone. We left that room. And I'm receiving this message, this guidance, and he's taking me back to my wedding, which I suppose is why I'm wearing my wedding kurta, and we did the tika. Uncle's not there anymore. It's just Nori kind of taking us back to the Hindu ceremony, which took place in Angeli's parents' house on August the 1st, 1992. So that's where you do the 7 times around the fire. Each person has their own scarf. And then at some point, you tie your scarves together.
You tie the knot.
You tie the knot. So this is where it's a 5,000-year-old ceremony, and you literally tie the knot. And that's the point at which you're married. So he said, okay, now look at the way the 2 scarves are tied. And he asked me, what shape does it make? And I said, well, actually, it makes the shape of a heart because it's drooped over my shoulder. And then it dips in between us and it comes back over hers. Then it dips between us and it's tied in the bottom. Hopefully I remember this correctly. He said, now, where is your heart in relation to this big heart? And I said, well, mine is inside it. It's inside the garland. And he said, well, where is hers? I said, well, hers is, it's intersecting her heart.
Yeah.
And he said, this symbolizes in the first part of the marriage, she's protecting you and she's kind of dealing with some aspects of the outside world and family for you. And you focusing on supporting family. She's protecting you so you can do this. And then you do this. It said, now we do some more rounds of the fire. And we come back and sit on the chair again. And he said, well, now what's happened?
Switch sides. You switch
Oh,
sides.
we switch sides.
Mhm.
We switch sides. And he said, well, where is your heart and hers now? I said, well, now hers is all deep inside and mine is intersecting. And he said, this is because your roles are now reversing in this phase of your life. Your contribution has been mostly made, and it's time for you to let her offer her gifts. And your work is not as important as it used to be.
2010, wasn't
It
it?
was very shortly before I started going part-time, and it was within a year of when your dad said, hey, let's buy a place in Florida. That was an important time for us and Angeli's parents. By the way, I've had multiple dreams of both of them. Those have also been beautiful. So that was really a transformative dream for me in the sense that it changed my mindset. Okay, my job's not the number one thing anymore as far as my time is concerned and priorities for how I spend my time. Now I got to do more things around the house and with the family and let Angela offer her gifts.
We discovered the name Nuri when translated, translates to light. And I think we tried also to research the name Thanthanam. I couldn't find any sort of translation for that, but Nuri
I'm sure
definitely
I will
means
be
light.
meeting some Sanskrit scholars as the years go by, because I have an interest now in mantra.
Stephen, I'm being told, like, I've got a gentleman here, and he says often you have out-of-body experiences, that you will be in bed, but actually you'll be looking at yourself in bed. So what is he talking about?
Well, I don't remember any instances of myself looking at myself in bed, but I have some experiences flying in my dreams.
That'll be what he's talking about.
Mhm.
He's putting it in a more practical and understandable way, but you are in your bed, but you're out of your body, if you know what I mean. That's what he's trying to say.
Is it Nuri? Is it Nuri who's with you, Marion?
The gentleman has curly hair.
So I never saw Nuri. He was a voice. He might have curly hair, but he was a voice. Uncle didn't.
Yeah, the person I'm seeing has a head of curly hair. Dark curly hair. It's beautiful, beautiful curly hair.
Is it quite wide? Is it quite wide
Yes.
away from his head?
Yeah,
Yes.
quite. Yeah,
And-
lots of it.
Yes. And does he have a round face? Like a roundish face?
Yeah, you would say that. Chubby cheeks.
Cheeks, yes? Yes. Ask if it is Sai Baba.
Is he a soothsayer of some kind? Is he
Yeah.
this?
That's what
this gentleman is.
That's who Sai Baba is. He's a sage.
Prophet. Yeah, some
Prophet
kind
sage.
of prophet.
Yep.
He's saying, you know me.
This was our last earthly incarnation avatar of Sai Baba. He'd be wearing an orange scarf.
No,
over
I
his-
can't see the
kurta.
color. All I've got is I can see he's talking directly
Mhm.
to Steve. He's saying that you know me, and Steve knows me. You know of him.
Mhm.
I know of him.
Yep.
Okay,
And you
so,
would. And you would.
I've got.
Ah, the man. She has
Was
the
that-
man.
That's Sai Baba.
Yeah, that's him. Curly hair, big curly hair.
Oh, big curly head. Okay, so
Mhm.
that
Who
wouldn't
is
be.
that then?
That's Sai Baba.
It is Sai Baba.
Mhm. So he may have connection to Nuri Danthanam. Just guessing.
It's saying to me that you have out of body experiences. While you're asleep, you're never in your bed. You're always out of it.
Well, I can tell you that I'm a very agitated sleeper.
We have a very large bed. Any
Does
more?
the number 3 have any significance for you?
The number 3,
Because I'm seeing this
there were
as
3 grandparents that I knew There was one grandparent that I didn't know very well. He died when I was quite small. That was my maternal grandfather.
Because everything you're saying always ends up in a 3. August 8th or August 1st, 1992 adds up to a 3. 2010, when this thing came full circle, that's a 3. 3 years old, you mentioned as a significant age.
Mhm.
Your grandmother points to 3 years old as something to do with you and her at 3 years old.
Well, that was my mother. Yeah. My grandmother does.
The one who you said is with us right now?
Arnold, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you remember from her at that age?
Well, I remember loving my grandparents. Their house it felt like the way our house feels like, I hope, to most people that come in, that, you're loved. They were professional grandparents. We came out in the summer for summer vacation.
Yeah, but I'm getting about 3 weeks. I'm getting about a 3 weeks consistency.
Oh, well, that would be,
again.
yeah. 3 weeks
3
as well,
again.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Your first real taste of reality, isn't it? Your grandparents. Everything just goes to hell once they're gone.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Well, they were, I think in our life, we moved around so much, with my father as a clergyman.
So all the more importance for your grandparents to be in the same place.
Right. So they were always in the same place.
Yes.
My grandparents at Sydney and my grandparents in Lewisburg. And both were truly beautiful experiences, magical.
I found out a little more about Nuri Danthanam. He's coming through. Nuri Danthanam comes through from 9th dimension. So that is masters, teachers, guides, helpers, lords, and pantheon. There is a connection of Nuri Danthanam to Sai Baba as a Hindu prophet and sage. It was through your petitioning through Gayatri Mantra that connection was made. You channeled. That dream was not a dream. It was actually a channeled experience from Nuri Danthanam, who is the voice for Sai Baba, the voice of Sai Baba, at least in this particular case. And that's what I have to share with you.
Well, that's way cool.
I asked if it was prompted by the yoga. They said no. I asked if I asked if it was prompted by a particular mantra. They said yes, and it was Gayatri Mantra.
I kind of think of the mantra as advanced yoga.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But in terms of my asking if it came from yoga means asana in particular, the physical aspect.
Yeah. No, in fact, I hadn't done any that night.
So Nuri Danthanam is one expression of Hindu profiting. So maybe that's where some of your premonitions have been bestowed through you.
I've had a few.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly what I've received teaching, and I received guidance, what it was time for me to do in my life, how my role is going to change.
Yeah.
Angela, was he a monk in a past life?
I'll find out. I do know that, like his grandfather, being in the military, having been a brigadier general, I do know that 2 Earth lifetimes ago, for Stephen in his Akashic record, he was in a military role where he was responsible for lives of a company. You have the holding of the guilt that you were responsible and you couldn't save them. Not a Christian monk.
No. Like a Buddhist or something like that.
Okay, so let's find out. So definitely not Christian. Hindu. So he does have connection. Even at our wedding, when we had to recite the Sanskrit vows, our priest would ask us to speak what he wanted us to say. And, we just listened and repeated exactly what we heard. His ability to do it was beyond.
That's what I'm saying. I'm certainly not looking at I'm not looking at a pale white Canadian.
No, you're not. But let's find out. Let's find out how many previous, let's say, Hindu or Sanskrit-based lifetimes are in his Akashic. How many total lifetimes? Tell me again. First digit, second digit. Yeah, 67. So out of 67 Earth lifetimes, how many have had a Sanskrit, Vedic, or Hindu descent? Is that a first digit? Is there a second digit? No. 6. 6 lifetimes of that nature.
There was a documentary series, a weekly documentary series that was on in Canada during the 70s. And this one occasion they were in India. And by that point, I had no Hindi. And anyway, it was a Hindu festival where they were pushing this gigantic structure with wheels. Perhaps you've seen it.
And there's elephants. There's elephants in this parade.
There were elephants, yes.
Yes.
And it was the first time I had any experience of Indian culture, but it looked very familiar to me. I was quite taken with these people that had brown colored skin, but Caucasian features. To that point, I was only familiar with brown people who would have African features. Anyway, there's this very strong sense of recognition.
I was doing a project about 10 years ago, and I had a Hindu guide pop in. And this guy just loved to laugh at me all the time. I must have amused this guy 24 hours a day. Even when I was I knew there was a presence that had come in. I was trying to figure out who it was, and I knew it was assigned to the project I was working on. And I was doing dowsing with a pendulum on a chart. And I just said, right, give me something so I know you're telling me the truth. What is your name? It's spelled out Satvastu. Satvastu.
Satvastu.
So I said, right, Google Satvastu, meaning truth.
Ah,
Brilliant.
Brilliant. That's
I
remarkable.
wonder why all the work we do is confusing, Mark, because they get real giggle out of it.
Well, I'm amusing a lot of them right now.
We'd like to thank all of our friends and viewers for sharing this time with us to learn some stories that touch the heart at family level as well as at spiritual level. I know many of you have your stories and your experiences. We want to know. We want to share them with you. So please submit your story and join us next day. Stephen, thank you for taking the time. I know you never have time to do anything, but boy.
My pleasure. Well, I often do at this time.
So we all convey our hearty thanks for giving us
Well,
your
that was
precious
fun.
time.
Thank you for your interest in me.
Yes. And your quintessential
I feel like
experiences.
I've met another kindred spirit.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank
Absolutely.
you.
All right. Much
It's a
love.
pleasure.
God bless. Take
Much
care.
love, and we'll see.
Good night. God bless.
We'll see
Namaste.
everyone next time.
Namaste.